Today I'm selling this pachinko machine, and I thought before it goes out the door I better get some video of it, because this thing is cool. Right, so yesterday I went to Thorold to pick up a small collection of records from what seemed to be an old hippie that probably passed away. That's what happens when you die, you know, people sell all your stuff in an online auction and I come and buy it. So this person's auction, whoever they were, had a lot of really interesting stuff from the 60s, a lot of hippie signs, bumper stickers, hats and clothing, all kinds of great stuff, and a great little record collection that I'm going to get to. But before I went to grab that stuff, of course I had to make a stop at the thrift stores, and the first thing that I found down there was this. This is a freestyle electro type of album. These kind of albums were popular in the mid to late 80s, but they really didn't last. Their popularity was pretty short-lived, which is a shame because I think it's a pretty interesting type of music and something that you should definitely give a listen to if you've never heard any examples of it before. This isn't the best. This isn't the best example, but it's about a $5 record, and these ones all cost only $1 each, so that's not a bad start. Picked up this one, The Gospels According to Lily. Now, when you find black gospel albums, they can really be hit or miss, but there are a lot of ones that are hits. Any kind of more soul, funk-oriented gospel music can be very collectible, especially if there's good drum beats in it for DJs to sample. It's a really popular place for them to look in terms of making house tracks, electronica, any kind of music that's really built on sampling. So I had high hopes for this one, and it didn't really live up to my hopes. This is more of a standard, almost choral type of gospel album that just happens to be done by an African-American artist, as opposed to really being in the African-American musical tradition. So it's only about a $5 record. It is more collectible than most gospel records tend to be, but it's not anything amazing. Dogwood Country by Alan Moberg. This is a Canadian country folk album from Vancouver, which, again, Canadian music is another one of those categories where there are a lot of valuable records, but there are also a lot of real duds. And this one, once again, falls somewhere in between. It's nothing really special, but it is a solid $5 album. Not an easy one to find if you're looking for it. It's just the trouble of finding somebody who is looking for it. And it is the kind of thing that sometimes I hang on to, but this particular one didn't really have any tracks on it for me. I usually prefer Ontario ones that are a little more local interest, so it's nothing I need. Okay, we have the Gay Gordon. Not this guy, that's Joe Gordon, but of course the Gay Gordon is a classic folk song from Scotland, and that is what this is, a Scottish folk album. What I was hoping for with this one is a type of music that's called skiffle, which was popular for a short amount of time in the 1950s. It's sort of a fusion between quick jazz and folk music that is an important precursor to rock and roll. Skiffle is really the genre that inspired the Beatles in their early recordings, and if you check out the early recordings of the Beatles, there's a compilation album you can get that's called The Early Tapes of the Beatles, with Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers, as they were known back then. And you can really see the influence of skiffle in the number of folk songs that they were covering back then. This is not a skiffle record, this is a traditional Scottish folk sound, which is another unlikely genre of music that I actually enjoy. I have a collection, I'm just looking at them there off camera, but this one wasn't really anything I needed. I usually prefer the newer sounds of the folk revival from the 60s and on, as opposed to the classic, more traditional folk songs, because they've been done a million times. You don't need any particular album. But it's another $5 record. It's not a total dud, definitely. And finally, I grabbed this. I couldn't resist Garfield. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this one. This is from 1979. It's a Canadian rock album by Garfield French is his full name. And I can't get over having an album that's just Garfield, but it's another $5 one. It's nothing great, but it'll sell. I hope eventually. People usually eventually they'll buy any kind of rock music that you put up for offer, regardless of whether you've heard of it or not. Eventually it'll sell. So that's going in the $5 bin. So 25 bucks back, hopefully, on a $5 investment from the Goodwill. Nothing to complain about there. Right, and then we will move on to the main stuff from this Hippie's record collection, as I'm calling it. The first lot that I won, this was another online auction, in case I didn't say that already. So the first lot that I won was a big pile of 45s, and I got these all for $1 for the whole stack. And I really was hoping for some good stuff here based on the context of the auction. That's one thing that you have to do, and maybe that'll be my top tip for this week. And I'm going to try and include a little bit of collector's advice in every video. So my tip for this week is if you're looking at an online auction or even an estate sale or garage sale, you have to pay attention to what the whole array of items that are for sale, what they tell you together, because you really can find out a lot about a person, I believe, based on the stuff that they own and the things that they collect especially. And that's how I have made the educated guess that this person must have been a hippie back in the 60s, based on the amount of hippie stuff that they had. That's a really simple example, but using that kind of technique of studying everything as a group, it can really help you to figure out if there's likely to be valuable items in there or not. You can tell if the person was really a collector or if they were just more of a hoarder or accumulator. You don't really want to touch that stuff necessarily. So it's definitely useful. It's something that I do a lot, and it did definitely help me in terms of the record collection that we're going to get to, but it really didn't help me with these 45s. I was hoping for a nice stack of 1960s rock and roll rarities, but these are actually mostly from the 70s and even the 80s. We have Culture Club right on the top, of course, being an example of 80s music that hasn't really aged all that well. But yeah, I'm glad that I only paid $1 for the whole stack, because there really is nothing good in here, and I went through them all off camera to spare you the trouble of watching me go through all of these and tell you that they were junk, which they were. I mean, a lot of them aren't even playable. Like, that's broken. A lot of these ones here, these are warped, or they're just so dirty that they're not going to sell. Like, look at those two. You can probably see the warps. You know, I don't sell defective material. That's a way to really ruin your reputation quickly. So these, that's about 10 that are just going to go right in the garbage. The rest of these, I don't know. I mean, 45s, you can always sell 45s in the end, even if they're total junk. These ones, they're not that bad as songs. This would be a good lot for somebody who has a jukebox. We have a lot of rock hits. Like right here we have Alice Cooper. There's the Rolling Stones. There's even the Knack, My Sharona. That's a good song. So it would be good for a jukebox or for a beginner collector who has just some cheap turntable and wants some stuff to spin. But nobody who is really a discerning collector is going to want these. The condition's not very good. The titles are not particularly collectible. So I would say there's probably about 50 of them here. I would try and get $10 for that whole lot if I put them in a box. That's about the most that I think I could get out of those. And this is the main event, the true Hippies record collection that I was hoping for. I bought this little lot of albums for $9, and the picture showed them kind of spread out over the floor without much real care. So I had to, I took a quick look, and I thought that they might be some psychedelic rock albums that were mixed into them. So I did a bit of research, and the first one that I happened to look up when I saw the picture was this one here, Looking On by The Move. Sure enough, this is a psychedelic rock album, and it's pretty much exactly what I wanted. This is a British recording, but it happens to be a Canadian pressing, and I believe the first Canadian pressing. The condition is not bad. A lot of the time when you find psychedelic albums, they've been abused, to say the least. This one's not bad at all. It does have some pen scribbling on the cover, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't take away from the image that much. And of course the record itself is the most important thing, and it is pretty good. This would be about a $30 record in my online store. So this was a real find. Next up we have this one, Manfred Mann, Chapter 3. This one, you know, I felt a bit silly actually when I got this one home and looked it up, because this one was pretty much front and center in the pictures in the listing description, and I didn't even pay any attention to it. I thought, you know, Manfred Mann, I've heard of them, so I figured if it's something that I've heard of, it's probably not going to be one of those really rare, valuable ones. I was more interested in something like The Move, which I've never seen. That would be more likely to be the obscure kind of item I was looking for. So I looked right past this one, even though it was fully on display, and this is probably the most valuable record out of the whole lot. This is an original British pressing. I don't know if this was imported or they may have bought it in England themselves, and it is on Vertigo with the original Vertigo label there where it's different. You put this on your turntable and you watch it spin, you will get vertigo from this thing. And the condition is pretty good. You can see it has a small tear on the cover, and it is a gatefold cover. Pretty nice. The record has a few marks on it, but even in spite of that, this is easily going to get me $50 at least, probably closer to $60 actually. This is a really sought after record, and I had no idea. So there's always something you can learn in this business, and I learned now, if I see another copy of this, I'm definitely going to pay a little more attention to it. This one, however, this is a different story. Surfing with the Sunsets. There is a lot of very collectible surf music. You know, the Beach Boys came out of that genre, just as one example. The Surfaris. Think of things like Telstar by the Tornadoes, the Ventures. These are all you know, surf groups that made it. There's a whole lot more that really didn't make it, and they've left behind a lot of really expensive and desirable records from their careers. This one is this is a budget label release. This is from Master Seal, which was a Canadian-based budget label from Toronto. And this is really not a rock album, which is normally what you're talking about. When you talk about surf music, you can imagine that sort of twangy rock. That's really not what this is, although that is what it's marketed as in the liner notes even. This is more jazzy, almost, probably because it was done by the same studio musicians who did all the jazz records for Master Seal. And it's just not that interesting. It really didn't do much for me at all when I listened to it, and apparently it doesn't do much for anyone else either, because it's only worth a few dollars on the internet. Because it has a slight hint of the cheesecake cover, I think I could probably get $5 for that at the record show, but not a very exciting album at all. This is a better one. This is another psychedelic rock album, Game. This is on Evolution Records, which is a very interesting label, Evolution. They put out a real variety of music as well as spoken word records. I used to have an album that was to do with the first man on the moon, sort of a radio broadcast program that was on Evolution. So they really were a mixed bag. They put out a lot of interesting stuff they were products of their time. And this is another Canadian pressing, the first Canadian pressing of this album from Quality Records. And this is going to go for about $25. So it's another really good find that's worth more than the cost of the whole lot. And just another example of why I always get really excited when I see those psych kind of albums. They're just great. They sell really quickly and they sell for good money. So that is a nice find. Carrying on the theme, here is Mandala, Soul Crusade. This one is on Atlantic. This is another nice early Canadian pressing. This one's not in the best of shape. It's got a lot of marks and it's got a lot of fingerprints too. But the cover, you have to give it some credit for the cover, which is another gatefold, being in really nice shape. And it's basically what you expect. If you like psychedelic rock, then here's some. If you don't, then you're not going to get much use out of this one. It's really not a genre that I listen to be quite honest. I do have a few in the collection, but it's I don't know. It's a little bit too out there for me. This is about a $10 record, which I thought it would be more actually, because the cover really is great. That cover image is exactly what you imagine when you think of psych rock. But it's not that great of an album. It does have some. Well, when I say it's not that great of an album, what I mean is in terms of collector value. In terms of the music, this is a pretty well-known album in that category. It has some R&B flavor as well. So yeah, good find, but not incredibly amazing. And then we have Bush, and this band was founded by a member of the previous group I discovered in my research. This one came out on RCA Victor, which is a kind of a neglected label, I think, by collectors, because there really is a lot of collectible material that came out from RCA Victor, but the label doesn't get much credit. Whereas when you talk about labels like Motown or Atlantic, people are always talking about the labels and how great they were. But have some respect for RCA Victor. They put out some good stuff, especially if you're a fan of Canadian content, as we know I am. This one is in better shape, and although the cover is not very interesting, it almost looks like a Grassroots cover or something like that, which the Grassroots are really not very desirable at all. This one will go for about $15 though. It's a good find. It's got more of a hard rock and blues rock kind of flavor, less of psychedelic, and definitely less R&B. But a good find for collectors who are into that category of music for sure. And we have Wings of Sound from K-Tel. It's just like I was saying the other day. There's no matter what record collection you pick up, there's always got to be at least one dud, and this is a super dud, because this record is trashed, and even if it were in much better condition, it really wouldn't be worth anything at all. It's what you expect. It's a K-Tel compilation. It's the hits of the late 70s. This came out in 1980, so most of the songs are from 79. And what K-Tel used to do is they would shorten the songs so that they could get more on an album. Like this, how many have we got? 2, 4, 6. We got 8 songs on each side. Whereas normally you're talking about 5 songs on a side of an album, maybe even 4, depending on the length. So these songs have been trimmed, and for that reason, they're not really very desirable to collectors, because they want to hear the full version of the classic hit. So that's definitely a dollar bin record. Even if it were in better shape than it is, it would still go in the dollar bin. This one wouldn't though. This is Rosetta Stone. This is a release from Private Stock Records, which I'll let you see the label. They have a nice label, skyline design. Private Stock, they were in the late 70s and early 80s. They released a fair bit of rock and pop type material, but they really don't have a lot of valuable releases. This one, I thought this might be a bit better because the cover, to me, the cover kind of has that look that I get from a good record, but it's not great. It's only going to be worth about $5. I do think it's a pretty good album though. It's sort of a rock and roll throwback album, not far off from Sha Na Na or any of that kind of thing. So I do kind of like those kind of bands. It also has a bit of disco flavor, so you know, I like my disco music, but I'm going to resist the temptation and I'm going to sell it. We have one with no cover. It's Lighthouse. I believe this is their first album. Again from RCA Victor. This one, this would have been a decent enough find if it had the cover, but a complete album is worth more than the sum of its parts. When you have a loose record, it's really not worth anything. When you have an empty cover, it's not really worth anything, unless you're talking about extremely rare items. Even if it's something like even Led Zeppelin or AC/DC, I have examples of both, either a loose record or an empty cover. They're just not really worth anything to anybody, but if you put the two of them together, you could be talking about $30 or $40 for some of those records. This one probably would have been about $10 if it was complete, but it's not, so it's going in the dollar bin. And finally, we got one more taste of psych. It's the Association, Birthday. Yeah, the Association is a band that I have to admit I don't know as much about them as I should. I kind of I didn't really know they were into the psychedelic stuff too much. I thought they were more of just the soft rock, pop rock kind of sound, which is not really that desirable. But this is a good find. I mean, the cover images on these psychedelic rock albums are just great. I really love that kind of illustration. And it's about a $10 record. The record itself is in nice shape, a nice early release from Warner Brothers Canada. So yeah, that'll get me $10. So nothing to complain about. Definitely nothing to complain about. The 45s are not as good as I was hoping for, but they only cost $1 for the whole lot, and they'll definitely get me that back. And the albums are just a really good find. You know, if I could pick up small lots like that were comparable in quality, I would buy those for $10 for that lot of records. I'd buy that every day for a year. You know, you can't pass up on something like that. It's just a shame I didn't get more of the hippie stuff to show you. I would have loved to show off some of those signs and that, the old protest signs and things like that. They might have come in useful right now, but never mind that. But yeah, like I said, nothing to complain about. That's a great haul, and I'm really happy with it. And now I gotta turn the camera off and get on my way because I've got even more auction winnings to go pick up. It never ends around here.